I take the opportunity to thank Indira and her team for having me here to represent Salada Foods Jamaica Limited and also my country, Jamaica. And I'm sure we all know about Jamaica because it's on the map, and I'm sure you've heard about Usain Bolt. Now, what have you heard about him? You've heard about he's a legend, he's the fastest man in the world, he eats yam and cassava and breadfruit, he loves beautiful girls, but most importantly, what makes a difference with Usain is that he always has a game plan. And when I say game plan, it's because, as our presenter before, she mentioned that you have to have passion, and you have to have the game plan. And what does that mean? You have to be ahead of your competitors, plus you have to know what they're thinking at all times. And in addition to what Indira said yesterday, you have to have what? The right attitude, and you have to be fast. Now, with that said, my presentation has to do with the development of export growth. Now, what I found out is that most companies, they would just go right into marketing plans and implementation in terms of their planning. But one would forget that there's one more step that you have to consider before reaching there. And that is, can anybody tell me? It's the developmental growth, developmental plans that leads up to the developmental growth, which has to do with your business plan, which is very important. But before we go into that, I'm going to show you two small, very short videos. It has to do with my company in terms of Salada Foods, where we're coming from, where we are right now, and in addition to that is a TV advertising. We're over 54 years old, and we have not done anything at all differently until about 4 or 5 years ago. Now, with the presentations that was presented yesterday, in particular, Professor Rath, I can say and be positive by telling you that I think that Salada Foods is definitely going to be your success story. All right? Now, we had great initiatives, great focus. I've actually reviewed and listened to your solutions. And I think that this group, this forum, we have the initiatives. Change is good, but with the follow-up action plans, which I know the center is going to put in place, please remember that change is good, but you'll have certain challenges, especially the legislations and the finance sectors that is very challenging based on what we have heard throughout the presentation. But we have to be focused, work together. Network partnership is key. So with that, so let me just go very quickly because I know there's time limitation. I'm going to start the company profile with respect to who we are at Salada Foods.
Salada Foods Jamaica Limited has a reputation for producing superior quality products for the export markets throughout the Caribbean, North America, and European countries. A wholly owned Jamaican company, Salada Foods Jamaica Limited, SALF, has been listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange since its inception in 1969. The company maintains an intensive quality assurance operation and is committed to an ongoing program of research and development. In addition to coffee, Salada produces a range of other beverages, drink mixes, and dessert products. Salada Foods has now introduced authentic, real Jamaican ginger instant tea, sweetened and unsweetened. The diverse range of premium products offered by Salada meets consumer expectations, and distributors are assured of advertising, promotional, and marketing support tailored to meet the needs and characteristics of their markets.
And then we'll go right into our first TV advertisement that we have never ever done before in over 50 years. This is the first advertising that we have done. So change is good.
get to wake up to what other people dream about. Salada Jamaica Mountain Peak Instant Coffee. Wake up to paradise.
Okay, starting out with the advertising, right? The concept basically is that we have to believe in our country. We have to invest in our country. So the concept basically was to hit the highlights of our beautiful country, which we call paradise. So you will see a young lady waking up into the Blue Mountains. Then we switch right into the beach section in terms of Doctor's Cave in Montego Bay. Then we go right into cricket in terms of culture, which is at Sabina Park. Then we go into carnival. And then what we do basically is to market our country, and then we tie in the combination of our brand in terms of our product. So what you're seeing there is innovation, creativity. Based on the guidelines that Mr. Professor Roth had mentioned yesterday, it does work in terms of successful key factors. And what is important is that differentiation is key, because you want to be different. Everybody's talking about, when it comes to advertising, you talk about a product, you show on the vision side of it in terms of actually if they're tasting it or if they're using the product. But what most important is that you have to go to the next level of basically having partnership with the country tied in with the concepts of your product itself, and it does work. Let us move on to the developmental stages that led up to the successes of Salado. We will continue, and we have increased our efficiencies. We have doubled our sales profitability and revenues by using the following matrix of this developmental plan. It can be modified, it's available afterwards, and if you can go through it and you go through the various elements of what each presenter has presented in the past 2 days, you realize that we're on the right track. Okay, for every business objectives, you have to have an overall strategic direction, whether to rebrand or reposition its products or diversification to existing lines via introduction of value and added products. Implementing quality management systems should increase overall export earnings. With respect to Salado Foods, we started out as a coffee company. So what we found out is that the factory was basically underutilized. We only do like approximately then, about 5 years ago, was 2 process runs. So you do the actual roasting and ground of the beans and so forth, and then you would bag them, and then you automatically would just bottle as you go along. Now, with that, the efficiency was not there. So what we had to do was to focus on what next. So what we have done is to come up with new products, not just coffee, but also in terms of beverages like teas. Now, as I said before, differentiation is key. So we thought of ginger tea, which is very authentic, it's real, and what you found out is that competitors or companies in our own country was imported ginger from Thailand and Asia. So what about our country? Can't we do that? So what we did was we did partnership with the agricultural regulatory system and actually working with the private farmers, just like what we do with coffee, that we would independently purchase from them. And we went a little bit further in terms of the experimentation stages. It was to actually have our own greenhouses. We got our land, built our greenhouses, did our ceilings, did our formula, did our feasibility study, our market research, and guess what? It worked. So what you found out is that the local manufacturers right now who are importing this ginger product, right? You know what is happening right now is that the Jamaican consumers now are switching, because our focus is brand Jamaica or even brand Trinidad, brand Barbados. Focus on your investment, focus on what you have. Work with your regulatory systems. I know that you'll have legislation problems, you'll have bureaucracies, you may have certain challenges, but if we get together and work together under one umbrella and make that initial step it can work. In addition to diversification for Salado Foods, we also went into acquisition because as a manufacturing sector, and even if you come from a different sector, you can modify accordingly. We are now gone into food processing. And people would say coffee, and now she's going into syrups, she's going into sauces. How can that work? But it can work in terms of the various implementation, the various sectors, the various clusters, the things that we have mentioned throughout the entire seminar, right? So once you're focused, right, I know that it's going to be very challenging, and you will have issues, you will have risk. But diversification, new product development, and research, all those things that was mentioned is key. Now, for the near to medium objectives, once you develop a strategic export marketing plan, you have to identify and penetrate new target markets, which you have to identify accordingly, rebrand and reposition through new packaging and labeling, which we had mentioned, implement quality management systems, increase export sales by achievable targets, increase output by achievable targets, and the diversification of product lines. We mentioned yesterday in terms of management and human resources. It's very important regarding the investment of those who work with you. Spend the money, invest in training. These are the people who are important to your company. The management team with human resources, finance, business development, the production side, operational functions will have overall oversight and responsibility for project implementations, and of course, there will be accountability. Now, the challenges that we had faced during the period was meeting the specific market requirements to successfully penetrate the target markets. And for example, one of them was like trademarks, basically. And right now, especially going into the US markets, we have to go through the HACCP program, the GMPs, and that takes time and also takes money and finance because we have gone over 15 million Jamaican dollars already and the process still goes on. So it's a very costly, and I do empathize with the very small companies because it came up yesterday in terms of how are they going to manage, how are they going to finance. So all of those aspects, I do empathize with the small companies. In order to go through the developmental guidelines, you have to identify export marketing and promotional support. But what goes with that is the various requirements, the export marketing plan, support to identify the distributors and the buyers in the key target markets, participation inward and outward trade missions. When it comes to Jamaica, we have internal regulatory bodies. We work with JAMPRO, and we also work with JIPO in terms of trademarks. So they help us and they assist us and also go into these various missions, the various countries. We also participate in business linkage initiatives, and also what was important for Salado in the process was the registration on the World Trade Point Federation. Another need was the compliance of global food safety, which I mentioned before, was the implementation of quality management systems. Packaging and labor and advisory support has to do with the market technical expertise and the consistent supply of raw materials, especially with the coffee and the ginger. And the requirements definitely has to do with the supplies meeting your demands. For the production efficiency, continuous conduct of the energy audit, the implement energy management system, and the participation in quality management training, the sessions, the workshop, the seminars, and it comes back to the culture, and it comes back to investing in your people, which is very important for your company. For the export marketing plan development of the strategic plan, which will be the next step to guide you for the various activities, In order to penetrate the new markets and increase export sales earnings, the need exists for the development of this plan, and that's what we did basically to promote our products and activities. To identify the export markets and related to the various strategies, we have to have a budget. It can be supported by your company or other private sectors partnership. Like for example, in Jamaica, we go through JAMPRO. They have an initiative called Export Max, and they actually help us in terms of developing our marketing plans in addition to financing of the activities. And of course, the bottom line is success of your expected revenues. It has to do with your targeted sales, of how you establish your markets, how you introduce your new distributors, and we have done that successfully for the past 2 years. We have approximately over 24 countries and still increasing in terms of our success. For the promotional and key target markets for the participation, we go through on the website, and this website actually helps us in terms of who we are, and it also helps with the networking to get new distributors and partners. For justifications, in order to increase export sales and earnings, you have to know exactly what your justification for your projects in terms of building new distributors. Now, the next objective is to engage in aggressive export marketing to increase the market share in existing markets, penetrate new markets, and increase export sales and earnings. And as you can see, for each matrix, you have to have a budget accordingly for each section as you go along. So it's not as if you're having a marketing plan and you have an overall budget. It will not work. You have to sectionize it, look at your description, your objectives, your justifications, and then you have to measure it in terms of how much it will cost. Because if you don't do that, you're not going to get a realistic, practical budget for you to work with. All right, I'm just going to go very briefly, because as you can see in terms of the presentation, once you have your descriptions, your justifications, and your budget, you're on the right target. So based on time, I'm just going to go right through to what our expectations were and what we experienced. The expected impacts and results, we had achieved double sales in terms of last year. We were at like 50 million, and we increased that to about 94 million. We had gained access to more than 3 to 4 markets. We had actually hit the China market, and that was very challenging because of our products. We have to have the labels in Chinese, and we also have to have security codes, which is a regulatory system in China. And based on increase of also the US markets, we had actually increased our efficiencies. Now the assumptions, we had to have the commitment of the management team for the implementations of the various developmental programs. Now the assumptions, the commitment to pursue agreed market penetration strategies, the commitment to retool and upgrade the factory operations, which was key, and this is required to complete the food and safety certifications. Now, when we come to the risk analysis and the constraints, it was very important for us to focus on the inadequate supply of raw materials inputs for the ginger, because what happened is that the demand is so high that the supplies are not there, and that was definitely a risk factor for us. In addition to the insufficient market research information, along with the high cost of raw materials in terms of coffee, which goes up very, very rapidly in the past 2 years. Now, for the sustainability issues, it is expected that increased output, marketing efforts, and implementation of quality management systems, Salada's ability to meet export demand will improve, which will lead to increased export sales, which it has. It has doubled our profitability, increased our efficiencies, and this will increase our revenues moving forward to reinvest and to further expand our product line and range. Thank you very much.